Hey there. What if I told you that being a narcissist isn't just about personality? It's also about biology. Yeah, we're taking a deep dive into the narcissist brain on this episode. Um, and this is of particular interest to me. I was really curious when I discovered that I have narcissism, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Why? Why I have this? I mean, I understand the connection with my upbringing, the family of origin, being raised by narcissists and so forth. But I don't think everybody that's raised by a narcissist develops NPD. It seemed to me like there must be more to it than just learned behavior. So I set about exploring and investigating what actually goes on in the brain of the narcissist. And there is some interesting research out there about that. I just want to go over a couple parts of it because it was really illuminating for me. And as I've shared that with other people who've known me for a long time, I've found their response is that it's actually illuminating to them and allows them to have a more holistic view or a less like judgmental view of me, because I understand that some of it really is just my brain actually is wired differently, and that has caused for me to operate differently and respond differently, think differently, and view the world in a different way. So if you like that kind of nerdy science stuff, this is the episode for you. I'm going to not too sciencey, so don't worry about that part. But some of what really goes on in the brain of the narcissist. So some of the research has been done with different kind of imaging of the brain, and studies that look at tests that look at how the brain is functioning, what areas of the brain fire at different moments, compared to sort of the normal or the normie, and also look at the size of different structures in the brain and what those structures are responsible for, or what we use them for in the brain. So you can kind of look at it like that's the hardware. If we go to the computer metaphor, the hardware is the wiring in the brain, and the software is then what gets overlaid. The family upbringing, the conditioning we get from our surroundings, our interactions, and so forth. The hardwiring is much harder to change. I don't even know that it is changeable necessarily. The software is where we can make those interventions. But I think in the big picture of understanding the whole of what's going on, understanding the hardwiring, the hardware, is also a useful thing to take a look at. So one of the things that is discovered in brain imaging is that the narcissist has reduced gray matter in what's called the right middle frontal gyrus. This is actually the decision-making and self-control part of the brain. So when there's less gray matter, it means there's less neurons, because the gray part of our brain is the neurons themselves, and the white part are all the connections. There's other stuff in there too, but sort of generally speaking, at the most basic level, that's what that is. So there's actually less neurons, less brain cells in that portion of the brain for the self-control and the decision-making. So that makes some sense in terms of sort of those panicked responses, and for me, it makes some sense in terms of just that ability to be fully present and aware when I feel like that panic coming on of, oh no, somebody's trying to get something from me or get me to do something. Another area is they found changes in the medial prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate cortex. These are the ones that are going to make the most sense, because this is really about empathy and emotional regulation. So when you see changes there, deficiencies there, or just a different format, it really makes sense, because a lack of empathy or a decreased empathy or a complete absence of empathy, or mostly, is a very common part of the narcissist syndrome. And so that really makes a lot of sense that we see that as a brain structural difference also. It's not just that I choose not to be empathetic, or I didn't get those examples. The examples thing is true, that really my brain is wired in a way where it doesn't focus in that direction really much at all. It's much more into like the systems and the problem solving and the strategic thinking, because that's how my brain works. They also found compromised white matter integrity, or faulty wiring, in the right frontal lobe and temporal regions. So these also have to do with connecting empathy to conscious thought and activity. And so I saw an interesting study that showed that actually in some narcissist brains, the empathy centers do fire. But what the challenge is that they don't have the right or the proper connections to the rest of the brain. So while the empathy is happening in some, it's not connecting. So the narcissist actually doesn't make the mental connections to that empathy. The brain tries to produce that feeling, but it doesn't actually connect anywhere. And so that's why there's that deficiency with that. So it's kind of like, to the computer metaphor, it's like having a computer with outdated hardware. It works in these areas, kind of, but it doesn't run efficiently at all. And that leads to a lot of the dysfunction or the different functioning of the narcissist brain. So, these makes a lot of sense because the things that connect in terms of the brain structures and the personality or the way it's displayed are things like difficulty regulating emotions, impaired empathy, and the fragmented way of processing social and emotional information. Now, I don't experience it as fragmented because it's all I've known, but it explains a lot of the experiences I've had in the past that were always so confusing, where for one would be, somebody was expressing something to me, either something emotional for themselves or something related to me, like something I said or did or didn't do that's causing the person distress or to have some sort of feeling. And I don't really connect to it in that emotional way that it appears that other people do. I have learned strategically over my lifetime that the person is wanting something in that field of emotional response. And so I in the past would, just stab in the dark to try to find it. Like, oh, maybe they want me to seem defeated and sad, or maybe they want me to tell them I know how they feel, or whatever the case may be. Just trying anything, seeing what sticks when I throw mud against the wall, right? So that's what, before I understood that my brain just works differently, that's what I would try to do, because I thought if I just tried harder to be caring and empathetic, that it would work. Like that it was just some failing on my part of, like, I just was like lazy or didn't try hard enough. So it's really been relieving in a sense to understand that it's not just a matter of that I don't try hard enough, or that if I just try harder that I'm going to start performing like a normie. It's really like, oh, this is what's going on. I see that. That's not how my brain works. I don't perceive and think of things the same way. So rather than just trying to like figure out what the other person wants from me, what I've begun to do is just be honest about it. Like sometimes that looks like, hey, I know or I have the thought right now that you are wanting something from me. You're wanting me to say something or answer something. I have no idea what it is. My mind is literally blank. And so I think the best thing is to just, stop this conversation now. And if something comes to me with it, I'll get back to you later. Otherwise, we just have to, start anew next time, because that's all I can do. And that's an important first step. And I'm still there in a lot of cases where that's the best I got. Other times I can, I'm more with it, and I can say, I can tell, or I have the thought that you're wanting something from me, like, something emotional or an empathetic response. But that's just not going to happen. Sorry to say. It's just, that's not real for me. It's not how I work. It's not how my brain works. So I can tell you what's really going on for me. I can tell you what I see as the connections or the big picture without that emotional input or whatever, or just tell you, hey, that's not going to come from me. Sorry. But I think, you need to find that what you're looking for from somebody else, because I just can't offer that to you. It just would be fake, and I don't think you want that. And I know I don't want to be fake with you. So I do want to say that these findings that the brain is wired differently, it doesn't make an excuse for harmful behavior. And that's not my intention or my goal here. I don't want to be causing harm with my behavior to the people around me. And it's not really ever been my intention to do that. But that's really what's happened. But I think it's because of this complete misunderstanding by me. And then I misinformed my world, excuse me, by trying to fake it. So now that I understand that, I have the responsibility, I look at it like, to now inform my world, the people in it, of what's really real, and what's so. So having the understanding of how the, the hardwiring works, the brain works differently, it's really been a great foundation to sort of rest that on. So it doesn't end up being a matter of like me just feeling guilty or like I'm just a bad person, because fundamentally I know that I'm not just a bad person because I have this NPD. That's not what it means. But what it does mean is that my job and the best, most responsible thing I can do is learn about myself and understand it as well as I can, and then be really honest with people, even if it sounds weird or what I think is going to sound like totally not the thing they want to hear from me, which, is scary, certainly still, because it's a lot of sort of this panic response. But let me tell you, doing it maybe at the time doesn't feel great, but afterwards feels so much better than the old way of just faking it and having all of these disastrously dissatisfying conversations, or making agreements with people and promises how I'll be different or do things the way they're hoping that I do, and then fail again over and over again, because that's the pattern that gets set up by the old way. So understanding the hardware of the narcissist brain is really just a beginning point, a foundational point. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Awake Narcissists, where we're spreading the news that narcissists are people too. All right, have you ever wondered why some people seem naturally empathetic, while others, like narcissists, struggle with empathy? The answer might lie in how their brains are wired. We're going to dive into some of that today, but before we do, subscribe, give a thumbs up, drop some comments below, questions, what's working for you, what this brings up for you, struggles, all that stuff. I love to interact with you guys. Okay, we're going to dive into some brain wiring today as it relates to narcissism and as it relates to empathy. And I'm going to get a little sciencey with you. I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit if I look away from the camera, but I think it's valuable to really understand some of these details because as I've shared them with people around me, when I was learning it, have learned it, they find that it really humanizes the situation. And it's easier for the non-narcissist to not take it as personally when the narcissist acts weird or as a narcissist. So we're going to talk about two brain structures in particular. One is called the medial prefrontal cortex, or the medial PFC, and the other is called the anterior cingulate cortex, or the ACC. And these are two of the primary brain structures that have to do with empathy. So considering how another person might feel, putting yourself in their shoes, and then processing or emotional regulation, which then goes from seeing how someone else might feel to then feeling something, and that leads again to responding in a way that's normal. And so the way that works a little more in depth is the ACC, or the anterior cingulate cortex, detects emotionally salient stimuli. In other words, a friend's distress when they're expressing to you. And it evaluates their significance. So for example, the ACC may activate in response to like an emotional conflict or some other empathy eliciting solution. So this is when they hook up the electrodes to the brain and start watching what activates, what fires when different things happen. So under those stimuli, like a friend expressing distress or being in the middle of a conflict or seeing other people in conflict, that starts to fire the ACC. And so that's the part of our brain that detects emotions that aren't ours and starts to translate that in our brain. Then the medial PFC, or prefrontal cortex, processes these signals and then integrates them with a self-referential information. Meaning, that's the part of the brain that asks the question, how would I feel in that situation? So your friend is there telling you about how annoying and horrible their boss is and how much stress that puts them under. The ACC detects that, okay, this person's in distress, but the prefrontal cortex then allows our brain to ask that question, like, how would I feel if that was my boss? And then contextual knowledge to regulate the emotions and generate that appropriate response. So you witness someone's sadness, the ACC flags the emotional importance. Okay, this is sadness, we should notice this. And then the prefrontal cortex, or the medial prefrontal cortex, helps interpret the cause of their sadness and then helps modulate your emotional response, like empathy or sympathy. So in a narcissist, when they've hooked narcissists up to these same electrodes and other imaging, what they found is that there's reduced gray matter in these regions of the brain. So in our brain, there's gray matter and white matter, generally speaking. Gray matter is the nerve cells themselves, the neurons, And the white matter is all the connections, all the axons and dendrites, all the ways those connect, the wires. And so when there's less gray matter, that means there's actually less brain cells in those regions. So that really explains a lot of the behavior or lack of behavior of the narcissists related to empathy. And not just related to empathy, but related to that second stage, the active, the action or the production of a response related to the feelings of the other. And so not only does it have reduced gray matter, but there's also a reduction in that connectivity, is what they found as well. And so in some ways, it's kind of like the narcissist brain does that first step. So somebody is that same situation, the friend is talking about their terrible boss, how stressful that is. And the narcissist brain can pick that up and identify, at least in the ACC, the first area, that person is in distress and that's what they're expressing. But then connecting that information over to the medial prefrontal cortex in order to then ask, how would I feel? And then respond appropriately relative to the answer to that question, that is weaker. And so it's not that the narcissist has the inability to experience somebody else's emotions or experience that the other person's having an emotion and what that emotion is. It really is about that then connecting to the centers of the brain that would naturally, if everything was connected properly, roll into an empathetic response, that question of how would I feel, and then the response part being what I would say to the me that is experiencing that thing. So it's kind of like, like you get the signal, like your phone, right? You get the notifications, you got a message, but then you're never able to actually hit the button to open what that message is. So you know the messages are coming, and you might even know who it's from, right? Being a message from mom, but you can't actually open the app to then see what mom said. That's sort of like a crude example of how it works in the narcissist brain. But what's cool about this is, just like all the other structures in our brain, the more current understanding of neurology and how neurophysiology works is we can rewire our brain. Our brains are more plastic than science has thought for many decades. And so the more we can practice consciously those connections, the more we can actually start to build them. The nerves, the neurons that fire together, wire together is what they say. And so if you can consciously practice getting those neurons to fire together, that those pathways will become stronger and you can actually start to develop empathy. That takes some real awareness, conscious effort, and so forth. And it's a long time process. Don't expect that you can do that a couple times for a few weeks and then suddenly empathy as a normal person. I don't know if we can ever, as adults, change it completely, but we can certainly improve our ability to have those empathic responses. Little asterisk or side note, as I was starting to explore this territory, I noticed as a narcissist that I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted that. And I don't know if that sounds strange or not, but when the people I've known around me who are sort of the most empathic or emotionally based, a lot of times it seems like, from my perspective, it seems like pretty terrible. Like they're in a lot of pain. They're like dragged around by their emotions. It's very distracting. They act irrationally. All these things that are kind of foreign to the narcissist brain, especially the covert narcissist. And so it's like, do I really want that? Do I really want to feel more? Do I really want empathy? Because it kind of looks like a raw deal. Now, at times when those people are really happy, that seems great. But I was never sure if that was a good trade-off. But what I've discovered is, as I've kind of been going through this process of awakening to the narcissism and all the things I've been sharing, it's been happening, right? I've been actually experiencing empathy, the little, early budding shoots of empathy. And I discovered I actually like it. So if it's a foreign thing to you, if you're in that same place where you're like, I don't know if I want to feel things more because, emotional people seem like it's a pretty rough way to be, I get it. I don't think it's a thing we have to really worry about as narcissists. I don't think we'll ever swing on the pendulum all the way over there. But I have enjoyed the feeling of empathy. I've really actually liked it. And so there's a little bit of maybe hopeful direction for you. Let me know in the comments, have you had that same experience? Has it sucked? where are you at in that process? All right. Hey, welcome to Awake Narcissists, where we're spreading the news that narcissists are people too. Today I want to talk about how the narcissist brain processes relationships. Before we jump in, subscribe, give thumbs up, likes, comments, questions, what's working for you, what's not. I love to interact with you guys in the comments. So put your comments and questions below. And if this is valuable, remember to share it with someone in your life who it might work well for. Okay. Have you ever felt like someone didn't get you emotionally? Someone like me doesn't really get you emotionally. Their way their brain processes relationships might explain why you get that feeling. So there are functional differences in how the narcissist brain works in a lot of ways, but one in particular has to do with relating to people and empathy that I wanted to talk about today with a little detail. So research has shown a lot about how the brain works with a narcissist, how it's different than the normal person, and putting probes and I don't know the technical details, but basically they measure your brain activity and certain stimulus and see what lights up, what doesn't light up, what's connecting, what's not connecting, and then compare that to sort of the normal brain. And one of the interesting things to me is that there's a somatosensory resonance response. And that is when somebody else is experiencing a feeling or an emotion, part of the brain in most people lights up, meaning you can experience it and you are aware the other person's having an emotional response, and you can empathize with that, put yourself in their shoes. And believe it or not, in the narcissist brain, a lot of times this area lights up even stronger than a normal person's brain. I know that's really interesting because we suffer a lot from lack of empathy. But what happens is the connection between that part of your brain and the parts of your brain that then bring that into fruition, meaning connect to then actually considering how that would feel for you, and then how to relate to somebody with that, sort of taking it from the realization of there's something going on to the action that would follow that in a normal situation. That connection is much weaker in the narcissist brain. So it's kind of like you're driving in a car and the warning light keeps coming on and you know that it means something, but you really have no idea what it means and what you would do to fix it. So the way that ends up then translating is you have this thing light up in your brain and it's like, oh, there's something. And since it doesn't connect to oh, that's the other person, here's how I respond, here's what I feel because I'm feeling for them, empathy, it actually adds to the self-referential frame of the narcissist, meaning that the next question that comes to mind is, how does that relate to me? So rather than the normal person who might think, how would I feel if I was in my friend or this person's shoes, and then responding from there, in my brain it goes to, how does this relate to me? And it's not because it's like I am just like some evil person that only wants to know how things work for me. It just actually happens to be one of the baseline contexts that the narcissist brain defaults to. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's only in practice ends up being a bad thing when you're unaware that that's what's happening. Because for me, and I imagine for most of you as adults, you have that self-referential frame occur, how does this relate to me? But you've learned from all the negative feedback over the years that that's really not what you're supposed to think or how you're supposed to operate. So then you try to fake it. Like, oh, what do they want me to say here? What did I say the last time the person had something like this that actually worked versus what did I say the last time the person had something like this that then they were upset about? Or last time I didn't say anything and it seemed like the person was upset. So I better say something, but I have no idea what to say. Your brain just kind of goes through, our mind goes through this crazy hamster wheel of like, what do I do? Now I'm understanding that it's not bad or something wrong that I go to that self-referential framework. And then I can start building on that. So, whatever it is, it's like, okay, they're sharing something emotional. Okay, how does that relate to me? And then I can think, oh, yeah, okay, this is one of those times where they're probably looking for empathy. I'm not really feeling empathy, but if I can imagine how, they're having an argument with their boss is really, unreasonable for them. How does that relate to me? Well, their boss is unreasonable for them, and they might get fired. And we were planning on going to some concert together. And what if they don't have the money? I could go through that round. But then what I'm learning is to catch myself in there. Like, okay, they're not telling me this because of how it's going to affect me in my life. They're telling me this because they're wanting to express themselves and have me hear them. So I can stop and just listen. I can say, I can see that that's an emotional thing for you, or that's important for you. And I don't really feel it the same way, but I can totally get that it's an important thing for you. And sometimes just that is enough for people to feel, like they've been heard, because I'm literally telling them I hear you, without me having to pretend and think, oh, what do I have to say here? How do I act like I'm someone with empathy? The other thing about this, with this awareness, is you can start actually practicing building empathy if you want. And what I'm learning is that as I've been slowly building empathy, I kind of like it. It allows me to connect with other people a little bit more. And that's beneficial because I don't get negative feedback, but also beneficial because I just like it, Like I realize that there's something about having empathy that feels good and is satisfying. It makes my own personal life actually work better. And so one of the main ways I've been working on this empathy piece in my own life, and it's, it's retroactive at this point. And, as I get better at it, and I would say there's probably some examples, if I really searched, where I'm starting to get a little bit ahead of the game. But most of it for me now is still after the fact. So I find myself really considering interactions I've had with people afterwards a lot more now. Well, I used to do it before, but what I used to do before was just pile it onto the big pile of evidence that there's something wrong with me and I'm a bad person. Now, I don't put it on that pile anymore because I understand that my brain works differently. Now I think, oh, I wonder if that was one of those times, or I bet that was one of those times where, I could have expressed something different because they were expressing feelings, or they were saying something to me that they were excited about, or whatever the case may be. And at this point, what I do is I either clock that in my memory very consciously so that it, happens more in the moment in the future. And sometimes I'll even go back to the person and say, hey, when you said that thing to me the other day, that's really cool. Or, when you said that thing to me the other day about, the thing that's frustrating for you, it's like, I heard you. And I can imagine that's frustrating. If I put myself in that same situation, or when I've been in situations like that, it's frustrating for me too. After the fact isn't ideal, but I will tell you, it's like a muscle. It's like there are muscles that I've never used, so they're super weak. It's hard for my brain to even figure out how to activate them. But the more I exercise them in conscientious ways, the stronger they become. And that's what can happen with your empathy muscle too. Obviously not a real muscle, but you know what I'm saying. The more you practice it, wherever you're at, but from the perspective of that narcissists are people too, like the tagline of the channel here, that you're actually a person, there's not something necessarily wrong or bad about you, you can actually start building that muscle. So understanding how our brains process relationships gives us tools to create better connections, even if it takes a little extra effort. All right, I hope that was helpful. Remember, subscribe, give some likes and thumbs up, comment questions, what's working, what's not working. I love to interact with you guys in the comment section, so make sure you comment and share this with somebody who you might feel it's useful. All right, see you next time.